I haven't done a video in a long time, and I figured I would do one. I'm very bad at procrastinating. It's one of my flaws that I'm working on. I've actually started to do things I've been putting off for years, so I'm slowly getting back into it. I turned 45 recently, and I feel better at 45 than I did in my 30s and maybe even my 20s. But I might be a bad example because I didn't go and hurt myself with sports when I was in high school. Like, I didn't wreck my back and knees like all my friends have bad backs and bad knees. I also don't have a cavity yet, and I drink coffee every single day, and I still have pretty perfect teeth. I don't even really take good care of them. So I wanted to do a video on things that are dead, like industries that are dead. I'm not talking about like whale oil and, all that shit. But there are certain things in life that we still do that I find there's no substance anymore. First one that comes to mind is art. I find that art, the last great artist we had was maybe Picasso. You'll get the occasional one here and there that might put out something okay, but there's no good art. Like, I'm not even the biggest Picasso fan, but at least Picasso, like, I know his art. Like, at a glance, I know it's him. But we don't have anymore. There's no more Michelangelos. There's no more Leonardos, all the Ninja Turtles, Raphael, Donatello. But I always think of Michelangelo and Leonardo primarily because those two guys put out some, like, we're still talking about their art. They're both just geniuses when it comes to this shit. And the reason is that back in the day, you'd get commissioned to do something, and there was no fast way to do it. You couldn't spray paint things. You had to paint everything by hand. So I know the Sistine Chapel, the actual picture of it, is not terribly humongous, but it would still take a long fucking time, and it's not safe back then because there's no safety regulations. Or say David is something you couldn't do in a week. You would have to spend years working on it, or you'd spend a lifetime working on a project. So no one does that anymore because, well, we all don't have time to, but we have very short attention spans. So art to me is pretty fucking dead. Music has started to die. Like, music's always had bad phases. It's always had ups and downs. During the greatest periods, like the 70s is probably the greatest. There's still some, poppy bullshit in there that's not good. There's still like Disco Duck. But, music's always been good up until right around the mid-90s when corporations started getting a hold of, like, images for bands. Because bands have always had images, right? But usually the image was just what the band did, and you form that around, like, their image was formed around what they did. Now, can you be more thug, or can you be more, sexually revealing, or can you be more whatever? So they started making this boy band phase, and to me, that was the fucking first nail in the coffin. We still had 90s was the last great decade for music, don't get me wrong. Not because I was young then, but I'm way more tied to the 70s than I am the 90s. But the 90s were fucking really good. But the last half of the 90s, man, it wasn't the worst time in music, which is coming up, but it was bad. Like, boy bands were just everywhere. There was almost no substance. Pop music is usually still really good. Pop music at this point was fucking on its last leg. And then the 2000s came, and it was just garbage. That wasn't even the worst. The worst phase, I think, in music was that Nickelback phase. Because Nickelback, their first hit, was actually a good song for the original Spider-Man movie soundtrack. I thought it was a good song. But everything after that is such, you call it butt rock, just the most basic, fucking lyrically, and I'm nothing against the guys, they're probably sweet guys, but I just hated their sound. And then there was the 14 bands that sounded just like them who were worse than them, and it's like, what's that band? Not Three Doors Down. They were actually pretty good. Theory of a Dead Man. There's probably the worst of those bands. They were worse than Nickelback. Oh, that band fucking blew. Thunder Dicks. And then, we got our Limp Bizkits in there. And, I hear different things about Limp. I'm sure if you were at one of his concerts fucked up, you would have loved it. But that was just one of these things that popped hard and died immediately. And then we get up to now where we went through like a very hipsterish phase with music. It was all like, what's that Irish band there? There's something or other. What are they called? I Will Wait for You. And that was actually a pretty good song. But everyone started to sound like that. These very stripped down music and voices. Not even good just because that was in the style. It was fucking annoying. And then mumble rap took over everything, which leads us up to today and has fucking nothing on 90s rap. 90s rap was fucking awesome. To this day, if I hear rap, I just go, it's not Wu-Tang Clan. It's not fucking Cypress Hill, House of Pain. The list goes on. Unreal. So to me, music, other than occasionally I'll hear like one or two songs from an artist I like. Like right now, the only artist I'm actually big on is this guy named Hozier. Really fucking good. And I normally hate that kind of music, but he's really good. But music to me is pretty dead. You've heard all the greatest music you're ever going to hear. And my theory as to why is the Beatles came out and they weren't the first band to write. Well, no, actually, come to think of it, they were. They were the first band to write, like, create the pop song. And they churned out albums of amazing songs, either really heartfelt or poppy, but still, the skill level is unreal. So everyone under the Beatles they were very close to the source of, like, and they're not even my favorite band, but they might be the most important band. So then you get all these guys that were in the 80s who grew up listening to the Beatles putting out ridiculous music. So, but then after a point, you start to get influenced by the guys who were influenced by the guys who were influenced by the guys of the Beatles. So all of a sudden you have no connection to the actual source. You'd have to go back and listen to them and try to get your groove on with that shit. But you get far away enough from the source, and back in the day, you had to be the absolute best singer. You had the best fucking guitar player, the best bassist, the best drummer, the tightest lyrics, the most fucking intense hooks. Everything was each one of those guys would be. You don't find any one guy like that in a band nowadays. And then nowadays, you literally have a guy with an image who kind of writes okay-ish music. That's not. I mean, it's terrible, but you can ignore it, and it fucking sucks. Another industry to me that has been dead for a while is movies. Movies, again, another industry, a lot of shit comes out every year. A lot of great movies used to come out every year. We don't get movies like Indiana Jones anymore. There will never be another Indiana Jones. The closest is probably The Guardians in 2014, which was fucking unreal. But it's dead now because studios, like as time goes on, these corporations are less about products being good and more about how much money we can make, where can we cut corners, how can we make our shareholders happy. So we hit a point where movies became a calculation. We go, okay, this great romantic comedy comes out, everyone loves it, I just pick the one, Harry Met Sally, whatever. And they go, okay, that was a big movie for relatively, a low cost. So what we got to do is analyze it to death, pick it apart molecule by molecule, figure out the beats that worked, change the names of the characters, and try to remake that movie over and over and over again. Like Dirty Dancing, I had not either saw as a kid and don't remember or hadn't seen, and my ex made me watch it, and I loved it. It's the only romantic movie I think I'm like, there's probably a couple more, but that one comes to mind because it has... Well, there's a plot point where there's an abortion. There's some tough subject matter in that. And they both seem like they don't like each other. And when they do fall for each other, it seems very natural. It's not just, okay, the third act everything needs to come together. They actually get into each other pretty early, where most of these, they hold off until the very end when it's just like way past due, overblown bullshit. But yeah, nowadays they just literally look at a formula. And if they go, okay, if we put this type of character as the secondary character, we'll make 1% more money than if we put this type of character. Like there's no heart into it at all. For one reason, I can empathize with them, because if you're fronting millions of dollars for a movie, you would want to make sure it's not going to fail, because that's a big risk. Like studios can go under if they put all their chips in one. But again, that's their fucking job. And you got to look back to the 70s when they used to make things like Taxi Driver and, Apocalypse Now, fucking The Exorcist. They took gigantic risks. I always go back to Taxi Driver because the main character has a fucking screw loose and he almost assassinated a senator. But then the last second he decides, I'm going to focus all my fury on freeing this teen prostitute girl from a lifetime of sex slavery. Like he brings his date to a porno movie because he's so out of touch, like he's so not right with it. So you can have a hero. I wouldn't even call him an anti-hero. He's almost a fucking villain. Like he was like a whisker away from doing the wrong thing. They won't make a movie like that anymore, where the character takes risks and you're not afraid to show like they have to have the moral lesson of the movie. Like, just make a fucking movie and make shit happen and make it so it feels good and try something different and just. So movies to me I like Marvel movies, and Marvel's had a slump lately. I'm still with them. I'm not like everyone else. Oh, we got superhero exhaustion. No, they just haven't. Ever since the Infinity War saga, just there has been a couple of good ones, but a lot of them have been good, but not great. That's just how do you keep up though? I'll give them, and COVID I'm sure fucked with it. So I'll give them a phase to just kind of figure out the next phase. I'm hanging with them. I'm in the bag for these movies. And then lately, DC has been making some really good movies, although they're switching fucking ownership, which really breaks my heart. But other than that, there's usually one movie a year. I only saw it maybe last year, or maybe was it this year? Hereditary blew my fucking mind. It's such a weird movie. I saw Ari's two other movies. Midsommar was cool, but it didn't hit me like Hereditary did. But he writes these uncomfortable fucking moments where it's just you're holding your breath. Like, he does that better than anybody. But just Hereditary, because of the whole, if you haven't seen it, spoilers, but it's really fucking good. Like, this family is having real problems. At the same time, there's a whole demonic story behind the whole thing, and it all ties together. Every scene is just really well acted and good and shocking. Like the little girl getting her head knocked off, like, and then the brother just driving home in shock and parking the car and leaving the body there, and the mom finding it. Like, oh, what a fucking scene! Whew, it was a fucking, Toni Collette's performance is ridiculous. Everyone was great in that movie, just unreal. Sorry, my speaker just turned off. The only industry to me that is still, plays, musicals, I've always never really liked, and that harkens back, the plays thing harkens back to, let's just go back to Shakespeare. There've been plays, well, no, I'm sure plays been before that, but Shakespeare wrote a lot of phenomenal plays, and those are still good, but, like, anybody that's not at that level, I just find plays extremely boring. And I also find musicals just there's a couple, like Grease I saw for the first time as an adult only a few years ago, actually really liked it. It was good. And there was one more, Wizard of Oz is basically a musical. I only saw that a couple of years ago. Really liked it. Anything else? Hedwig and the Angry Inch was funny, so that's what it had going for. And the music was actually pretty good. But a bunch of, criminals and cops all dancing together and singing, like, I'm too logical for that. Like, you guys are trying to kill each other. Why did you stop and all sing together, And the songs aren't really that good. The only industry to me that is still going fairly strong is video games. Video games were a fad. Like, actually, no, step back a step. They were a one-time, like, there was one video game, it was called Laser War or something like that, and probably, there was one more before that, I think. And it was a curiosity, but there was something, and everyone who showed up, man, the fucking thing to put a quarter in on certain video games was broken because they put so many quarters in. So they realized, okay, maybe this has got something, and then they started, and Pong was not the first one. It was the first big one that caught on, but it was not the first video game. And then the industry exploded with Pong clones to the point where it caved in on itself. Oof. But arcades started doing well in the 70s. And then the Atari thing kicked off. They were worth billions of dollars in 80s money. Like, they were, maybe not billions, but like $300 million in the 80s, which is ridiculous. But then it all got fucked up with a bad copy, and I just saw a thing on video games, with a bad clone of Pac-Man. It just was terrible. And the E.T. game, which everyone returned them, and they were losing millions of dollars a day. It was ridiculous. Then there was the big video game crash. And then along came Nintendo. They said, okay, because the legal aspect of it, whoever was in charge at the time, I don't even know, I'm not really good at politician, said, we don't want video games. So they said, it's an entertainment system, and sold it as that. Put it out, and the rest is history, and video games have been running strong ever since. They've had some slumps here and there. And even Nintendo, who have had like one of the best runs ever lately, it's been a little rough for them. Sega even folded during this, even though Sega was amazing. They owned the arcades. They were so fucking good. But as far as video games go, I've got a backlog of games I haven't played that's probably 20 years old. Like, they're still telling me play Shadow of the Colossus. I have not played it. Shadow of the Colossus 2. I only played one of the God of War games. Not even the first one, but not Ragnarok, the one before that. Just God of War. Loved it. I finally played Last of Us. Loved it. And you realize these two games are mostly predicated on two characters that aren't really getting along or have a complex... Either they don't like each other, like in The Last of Us, or a father and son where the father doesn't... I don't know, he disapproves of the son because he's too weak. He's a Spartan, whatever. And then you just write some really tight dialogue around that, and then the rest of the game, action-wise, is really fun. And that's why these two games fucking just kick ass. There's hundreds of games, even from the 90s, like even just doing arcade games, which are fun as balls. And then you go to the Genesis era, the Super Nintendo era, phenomenal PlayStation. blew the roof off. Today, it doesn't translate as well because pixelated graphics always look good to me. And pixelated graphics have made a major comeback. There's a lot of indie titles today that are pixelated. But PlayStation won't translate very well unless it's a very specific kind of game. Like Symphony of the Night still looks phenomenal, of course, but a lot of games just very simple polys. It looks terrible. But then you go to PlayStation 2 and big improvement. The Xbox comes out. I mean, there's been big hit. There's almost a big hit every month it's been years now. Like something that literally blows the industry away. Like Resident Evil 4 comes out. Everyone's just creaming their pants. PC gaming has been going strong since the late 80s. Because computers were expensive back then. And now anyone can afford it. Like everyone has multiple computers, so it's not hard to get. Consoles tend to make the more fun shit and they make more money. But if you're a PC gamer, you can take advantage of a lot of things. I can play every Nintendo game that's ever existed, Super Nintendo, Genesis. You download an emulator or an arcade emulator, away you go. You can play absolutely everything you want. It's phenomenal. And they're also taking older games and either straight up remaking them like Capcom has done with the last couple of Resident Evil games, which are phenomenal, or they're going to this company called Good Old Games where they'll do a DOS-box version of a older game, which will not run on your new computer, and make it run so you can go and replay some really phenomenal older games. So to me, the only industry that's holding strong on this, who knows how long this will last. I think it is going to last, though, because you're limited with a video game creation by your imagination. Like a movie about The Sims would never work, or a movie about SimCity. Like that just seems weird. There's a whole bunch of video games that on paper sound fucking stupid, and then you play them and you're like, you could never do this with a movie or a cartoon or that's why I love video games. It's basically like being in a movie, but you get to decide what happens. And if you like a racing game where there's some shooting, there's a game for that. If you like a racing game where it's cartoony and explosive, there's one like that. If you like a puzzle game with some gangster shit in it, there's one like there's probably 15 like that. Like there's something for absolutely fucking everybody. And everybody today is in some capacity or another a gamer of some kind. Like I knew a lot of people that never played games. They said, I've never played games. But when, say, Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, I lost 6 months of my life, and then I've never played a game since. But everybody, at least at some time or in some capacity, is a gamer of something. So yeah, video games to me are just still kicking ass. I'm hanging in there for movies. It's just, there's only so many stories to tell, and it's all been done. So that's why it's hard with movies. I mean, comic books are still going pretty good. I think they're still at a good popular level right now. I don't know if that's the most popular they've ever been, but that industry is still going strong. There's a lot of great stories that have been told that can get translated into movies, and that's the only reason I think why the comic book movies, to me, have been doing so well and why I'm such a big fan of them. Because you go through 70 years of Captain America, and you find his top 30 stories or top 5 stories, and you take the greatest elements out of that and turn that into a movie, and then you've got another 100 to go. Like, it's unreal. So yeah, I'm going to do more videos. Like I said, I've just been fucking lazy.